Decisions, not conditions. I'm Jessica Denson, and this is Lights On. As we are sitting here, we are witnessing a global spectacle as a war criminal, a man who has cultivated the current illegal president of the United States for almost 40 years, was allowed to step foot on American soil, allowed to step foot by a predator, a convicted felon, a man who is constitutionally disqualified from office. Conditions are not what are defining us right now. Decisions are what are defining us. I borrowed that phrase from Governor Gavin Newsom, who yesterday, in what has been one of the most clear examples of fighting back in the way that we need to the lawless takeover of this tyrannical administration, said that we need to start focusing on our decisions. And I could not agree more. I have a guest today who has been at the forefront of that fight, who has not been waiting to take action, who has recognized from day one that we are dealing with a tyrant wannabe and that we cannot wait until we have the votes or wait until it's convenient to uphold our constitutional duty to remove him from office. That guest is Texas Representative Al Green. He's going to join us in just a moment. But as I mentioned, as we are starting this live right now, the world is tuned in to this spectacle, this cruel spectacle of two men who have absolutely no place being in positions of leadership. A man who years ago the world was rightfully ostracizing for those unthinkable killings in Bucha, for the unthinkable daily drone attacks in Kyiv, who the world was sanctioning, who the world was refusing to give a platform to. And today, Donald Trump welcomed him in Alaska, literally rolled out the red carpet for him, clapped when he approached him, welcomed him into the presidential beast as Vladimir Putin sat there smiling in what will no doubt be paraded on Russian television as a major victory in itself, regardless of what comes of this meeting. We cannot forget that Donald Trump is a Russian asset. Multiple security agents and Russian intelligence agents for years have confirmed that Donald Trump was given the asset name of Krasnov, so-called beautiful one, years ago as the Russians were cultivating him. As they wrote that op-ed back in the 80s for him that was placed in an American newspaper with his name penned on it, calling for the dismantling of NATO and criticizing NATO, what basically Vladimir Putin's dream has been for years, to weaken NATO and reestablish the USSR, who his associate, when he arrived today, had the emblem of on his shirt. This is where we are, and it could not be more imminent right in this moment to seize back our democracy from these fascist forces that are taking it down. In the backdrop of what's going on with Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump right now, we of course have his attempted takeover of Washington, D.C. It's really quite a pathetic spectacle. Here's a picture from the Flare headquarters right outside of Union Station, where they have the 24/7 encampment set up, committed to impeachment and removal of Trump. We will be having a massive event on September 2nd, and they've literally put a tank on this property, a tank on Columbus Circle outside of Union Station. It's really a ridiculous spectacle. The folks at Flare have been sending me images from Washington, D.C. of police, just a crazy amount of police stopping one individual who obviously is no harm to anyone. A lot of the attacks have been on the homeless and rounding up the unhoused people in Washington, D.C. I was very grateful to receive a comparison to what was going on in Germany in the 30s from Dave, our friend at Flare. And I want to share this with you. This is from a Nazi from Nazi Germany in the 30s, from the Breslau-Hunsfelder Stadtblatt, which is the current Polish city of Wrocław, which was once the German city of Breslau, on September 20th, 1933. Listen to this excerpt from the newspaper. It says, beggar raid in Breslau. In the past week, the police carried out another major raid against beggars, the homeless, vagrants, and other antisocial elements in Breslau. Over 200 people were picked up during the operation. Many of them were taken to the workhouse, while others were expelled from the city. The police announced that these actions will continue in the future in order to keep the city streets clean and orderly. Authoritarian Playbook 101, to use the pretense of a crime problem, the pretense of dirty, ravaged streets, which Washington, D.C. is anything but. It is my home. It is where I am from. It is where Congressman Green works every day, where we have met recently together on so many occasions, rallying protesters against this tyrannical regime. And those streets are so clean in comparison. Yes, there are some areas that need a little bit of cleanup, but this is a complete lie, just like the spectacle we're watching in Alaska right now. It is a complete lie about the city of Washington, D.C., which is a beautiful, beautiful city, and where they are taking advantage of the most vulnerable. This is the Nazi playbook. This is the fascist playbook. This is how it starts. Just like the Auschwitz death camps were predated by roundups of migrants into migrant detention centers, much like they are setting up today under this lawless administration. So the warning signs could not be more clear. Just this week, yesterday, as I mentioned, Gavin Newsom is fighting back with the support of all of the lawmakers in California, as well as the constituency and the delegation of Texas leaders, including my guest today, Rep. Green. And he has announced that there is going to be a ballot initiative in November in California in response to Trump rigging Texas elections. It will be called the Election Rigging Response Act, and this will be something that voters in California can make a constitutional amendment that if Texas proceeds with this lawless gerrymandering, adding 5 seats that will go to Republicans and keep the House in control of Republicans so that Donald Trump can continue to wield lawless power, that California will respond by redrawing their own maps and balancing the playing field. Finally, fighting fire with fire, what has been needed for so long. You've seen this leadership finally from somebody like Gavin Newsom. You see it from people like Beto O'Rourke on the ground in Texas. You see it from the Texas Democrats who left that state to deprive their Republican colleagues of quorum. Hello, Washington federal lawmakers. You could be doing the same. My guest today is somebody who has been standing out and taking that lead, and I am so grateful for him, so grateful to platform him. He's taken the lead on so many things, also on the situation in Gaza, the unthinkable genocide. This week, Israel continued to kill journalists. 272 journalists at least have been killed in Israel in Gaza since the beginning of this war. Prominent Al Jazeera reporters were killed this week under the false pretense that one of them was a Hamas terrorist. I think they talk about every 2-year-old in Gaza as if they're a Hamas terrorist, as these poor children starve to death. Unthinkable war crimes going on in Gaza, from the Israeli government, and backed by U.S. money. Unthinkable. And Rep. Green has been very outspoken about that as well. Now, just today, and we'll probably talk about this more with Representative Green, the city of Washington, D.C. sued the Trump administration over the lawless attempt to take control of the DC police force, declare a national emergency, and what Pam Bondi did in an order last night, trying to name the DEA administrator as the acting chief of the DC police, over their actual chief, Pamela Smith. Now, this has already been litigated out in court today. The city of DC asked for a temporary restraining order, and they seem to have come to some bit of a compromise where it is clear that the police chief will not be replaced by this Trump administration official, but they are still allowing the Trump administration to wield control and to direct Metropolitan Police Department to do what the Trump administration wants, which is a blatant, I believe, disregard of the Home Rule Act, which only says that this kind of authority can be exerted in an emergency. And there is clearly no emergency going on other than the emergency at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. So without further ado, and on that note, please join me in welcoming back to the program Congressman Al Green. Congressman Green, as always, so good to have you here. Welcome back to Lights On.
Thank you. It's an honor to be back, and it's an honor to know that there are avant-garde personalities. I think when you're the first to say it, or when you're out front on the issue, people don't have the level of appreciation for you that they should. And I appreciate the way you address these things, and you're not afraid to be the first to speak truth, not only to power, but about power. You weren't afraid to say that there was genocide taking place, and there is genocide taking place. It takes courage to do this. It really does. And I respect you for it and appreciate you greatly for calling to the attention of our country that we have now devolved into authoritarianism. We have an authoritarian president. What he's doing in Washington, D.C. is disrespectful. He has disrespected the government that's there. And it is also contrary to what the law requires. If there's an emergency in Washington, D.C., then he can say that there's an emergency in almost every city in this country. And he can do in other places with a greater degree of difficulty, but he can do in other places what he's doing in Washington, D.C., because he's already exercised that power in Los Angeles. He brought in National Guard troops. So we have to realize that this is an authoritarian. He's behaving like an authoritarian. The unfortunate thing is you are part of the avant-garde. The media in the main will not say what needs to be said to bring this to a standstill. They won't do it. And I thank God that you are doing it.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for recognizing that. That means the world. I also want to just thank our audience. We have such an incredible audience here on Lights On who have joined us because they know this is a movement. They know this is the place they can come for answers, not just diagnoses of the problem, but answers. And they have answered the call so beautifully, I think, as you and I have seen in person when we've met together, the incredible people filling the streets with us. This is the sentiment. Like we are voicing what is the sentiment and the heartbeat of this country. This is not who we are. Maybe on that note, and thank you again so much, Congressman Green, for recognizing that in me. And I absolutely recognize it in you too, which is no news to anybody who is watching and knows you. But on that note, I wanted to actually give some voice to the people who spoke out today in Alaska, who stood out to protest this platforming of war criminal Vladimir Putin. So let me play that clip for you.
We need to stand with Ukraine!
Trump thinks he can negotiate anything. He can't negotiate himself out of a paper bag.
They are our allies. Russia is our enemy. Let's not get it twisted.
This is just grandstanding for Donald Trump. He likes to look good and think he's doing something, but he's not doing anything. And meeting with Putin is, actually, I don't know who's worse in terms of making a deal and not actually adhering to it. So there's two guys in a room, neither of whom can be trusted or can trust each other.
So as we were watching that, I was just getting updates from this press conference going on. And apparently Vladimir Putin has proposed that the next meeting between these two great pals happen in Moscow. Let me just get your thoughts Representative Green, on what is going on right now, this platforming of Vladimir Putin, this exclusion of Zelensky, the one who has been subjected to this hostile invasion of his country. What are your thoughts on this meeting today?
Well, thank you for the opportunity. Let me start by saying I support those persons who are out there protesting. I think they have an excellent point. Stand with Ukraine. This president thought that he would bring about a cessation of hostilities by giving Vladimir Putin everything that he wanted. He offered literally a surrender of Ukraine. The president of Ukraine was a little bit disappointed with that behavior, and I'm being kind. But he spoke up for himself when he met with the president in the White House. That was something that the president didn't expect. He expects everyone to kiss the ring and to behave as though they should see him as some sort of superior personality and themselves as subservient and servile. Well, he didn't do that. And that did not bode well for him with the president. But again, the president's means of solving a problem is to side with the superior power. He said he'd do it in one day. That was what he thought would work. Unfortunately, Vladimir Putin had other ideas. Vladimir Putin assumed that he had the right to take all of Ukraine when the president tried to give him some sizable portion just to have a cessation in hostilities. So I believe sincerely that the president is willing to do whatever Putin wants to bring about a ceasefire. And Putin does not want just simply what he has. He wants more. That's been evidenced time and time again. And he's going to continue to push. I'm also very much concerned about what you've said about two persons, both of whom seem to be rather ruthless and reckless. They don't seem to have much concern for the people that are being harmed. President Trump didn't care anything about the Ukrainian people when he started this process. He has sort of developed this concern as a result of the way the polls are portraying him, as a result of his realizing that he's not going to have the peace that he thought that he could get. And I shouldn't really call it peace, but the cessation of hostilities that he thought he would get by simply giving everything to Putin. So here we are. They're meeting today, and what has been accomplished? Well, he has brought Putin back to the stage. He has given him credibility. He has literally endorsed him now as a person worthy of global attention, worthy of meeting with world leaders. Putin has already won. And then there'll be a second meeting, you're telling me, in Moscow. Well, that second meeting further solidifies him as a global leader who's worthy of receiving the heads of state. He was a pariah for some time under the prior president, but he has been brought back into the mainstream under this president. Very unfortunate. And finally, this are my thoughts just on this process. The president knows very well, that until he exercises some degree of force, now that can be with sanctions, or he can decide that we're going to continue to support the munitions needed by the Ukrainians to fight this war. Until he decides that he's going to do something that is forceful, Putin is not going to stop. Why would he stop when he believes that he can move on? Now, I'm told by news sources that he's losing the war. Well, losing to him may not be the same thing as it is to us. Losing to him would mean that he has to take on greater injuries and harm to the Russian soil as opposed to the people who are on the front line. He seems to see soldiers as expendable. He doesn't want harm to come to the soil of Russia. He doesn't want fighting in Russia, but the soldiers are expendable. And if we're going to do something about this, we have to use greater leverage. That leverage can be sanctions, or it can be to provide munitions to the Ukrainians to fight their war.
Yeah, like any true authoritarian, the people are always expendable, right?
Right.
It's just like to Donald Trump, the people are expendable, including his very own people, who, Representative Green, we've been watching over the past month, have been waking up on one particular issue, this issue of his connection, Donald Trump's connection to Jeffrey Epstein. Now, I believe that if anybody has the information that we all just know in our hearts and souls to be true about Donald Trump, an adjudicated sexual predator. Let's be clear, this has been adjudicated in a court of law already, with dozens of women accusing him of sexual crimes. If anybody has that information, it would be the Russians. It would be the Russians. These are people who have been bailing him out for decades. When he was bankrupt and was just going to be a remnant of an attempt at a American business luminary who we all made a joke of, who bailed him out? Russian oligarchs. Who was filling those condos in Trump Tower for years and buying them above market value? The Russians, the Saudis, foreign governments. So in the backdrop of all of this is the Epstein files, that his base, this one issue, people have finally been beginning to wake up about and to not have patience for, because they have been so, insistent on the one issue of child pedophilia. Apparently, this is the one issue that really, really matters. And it's exposed that Donald Trump wants to cover up his connection to a child pedophile. And more is exposed about Donald Trump's own interactions with young women. What do you think about the need to keep this conversation at the forefront? And what I've been doing on Lights On, Rep. Green, is really just connecting the threads of his predatory nature as a sexual predator is the same way he's preying on our democracy. It's the same way he is preying on everyone who he is using as pawns to keep himself in power, out of prison, and to self-enrich himself to the tune of billions of dollars.
Well, I sincerely believe that the president is using this day as a distraction.
Yeah.
The president has tried every underhanded methodology possible to distract from the Epstein scenario. He, by the way, is one of the persons who engendered it. He cultivated it, and now it's come back to haunt him. He never thought that he would have his base demand that he do more than he's willing to do. He thought that he could always hush them. So it would not in any way surprise me if at some point it is revealed that all of this is a part of that shiny object that he likes to display. He knows that by meeting with Putin, that he'll get world attention. He knows that this is a distraction from other things that are harmful to him. So he distracts now. We're going to pay attention now. It looks to me like not a lot is being accomplished today. Maybe there'll be something said that I haven't heard about so far, but it looks like there won't be a lot accomplished other than this will prove to be a 2 to 3 day at least distraction. And then we'll start to talk about the next meeting that will take place. He has a problem with Epstein. He would release everything if he were a person that had nothing to hide. That is the type of person he is. He always enjoys seeing others suffer. And this kind of suffering is something that he is avoiding because the finger seems to be pointed in his direction.
Absolutely. And that is one thing that we are going to be highlighting without a question of a doubt on September 2nd in Washington, D.C. This is the next event of the Removal Coalition. I will say without hesitation, it will be the biggest so far in Washington, D.C. on September 2nd. Remove the regime. We are having a kickoff at Flair outside of Union Station, and then we are going to go into the halls of Congress, remind them of this scandal, and demand that Donald Trump be impeached and removed. I believe Representative Green will likely be joining us there on the day. I don't know if we can get a confirmation.
We are. my calendar is being cleared, and my anticipation is
Wonderful.
to be there.
Wonderful.
It'll be a day for me to have an opportunity to visit with our friends. May I add one additional thing?
Yes.
The
Yes.
president is also putting American prestige on the line by meeting with Putin. He's doing this. It is a distraction. This is a part of the shiny object strategy. I think that he really does see some currency in doing this for purposes that we obviously can't prove, but we do know what his behavior is. So this is just another part of that shiny object strategy, but he's putting American prestige on the line by meeting with a person who has been declared a war criminal, who has invaded another country. By the way, the president has yet to say that Putin is at fault for the invasion. He does not say that emphatically. He has always had reasons to say that this would never have happened if he had been in charge, that he's hinted that Putin has good reason to invade Ukraine. Unfortunately for us, he can get away with it because the mainstream press is not challenging him as they should, as they would challenge me, I'll be challenged for saying some of the things that I've said tonight by the mainstream press, but they won't challenge him for many of the things that he will say that are just totally without merit.
Yeah, it's infuriating to most of us to watch the coverage of this administration, knowing who this man is, knowing that when he reassumed the presidency, he had just been convicted of 34 felony counts. He was on the hook in 4 separate jurisdictions for criminal trials that basically vanished because of his retaking of the presidency. And we have known that this man is a con man for years. We've known that he is a sexual predator. We have seen all of the things he has done to terrorize and harm and divide people. And to continue to legitimize him and act like he is acting with the best interest of our country is sickening, I think, to most of us that watch the so-called mainstream coverage of this administration.
He is also a twice impeached president. And
Yes.
is likely to be a thrice impeached president. My suspicion is that if we regain the House, I think there'll be enough courage among members to conclude that much of what he has done with the judiciary, separation of powers, disrespecting the right to have a trial, some semblance of a trial, some semblance of a hearing, and under certain circumstances, we call it due process, failure to accord due process. I think there'll be enough persons to say we should impeach him for his transgressions. I think so.
I'm glad you brought up impeachment, because you have been the one member of that body who has had the courage to not only bring articles of impeachment, but to force a vote, to put your colleagues on the record as to where they stand on this matter. And the reason I titled this show the way I did is because I really do see a pivot in the way that that Democrats are fighting back in certain corners, including your colleagues in Texas, following your lead. I mean, I remember weeks ago you were bringing this gerrymandering issue to the forefront, and Governor Gavin Newsom in bringing up this ballot initiative that will level the playing field if Donald Trump tries to illegally rig the 2026 midterms. I want to get your thoughts on that, but more importantly, I see this moment as an opportunity, Rep. Green, not just to wait for 2026. And I know it's never been your narrative or your thought to wait. You've been taking action. We need to seize this fight now. I see this as an incredible opportunity for the impeachment movement to happen, and the impeachment conversation and willingness to vote for it, whether or not it seems like we have the numbers at this moment, for that to happen now and for more and more people to join that fight. Can you comment on those two things, just kind of the progress we're seeing in the pushback and growing the impeachment coalition and the urgency of the need for that now?
Well, yes, impeachment is permeating. It is something that has called to my attention when I'm out and about. I tend to value what people will say to me when I'm in a food store or I'm pumping gas. I value what they say, and people are very much encouraging that we continue the fight to impeach. I believe that other colleagues are starting to see merit in doing this. There are some who have thought that it is better to wait until we can win. I believe you have to lay the foundation for a victory. And I think that that's what we're doing. I think that the people who've been supportive of this movement, I call all of them Davids because the president is a Goliath, but he's got millions of Davids out there. And I think that they are building the foundation for his final impeachment because I'm hopeful that we will regain the Senate and the Senate will convict him this time. He is a person who is unfit to be president, unfit to accord liberty and justice for all, unfit to produce government of the people, by the people, for the people. He doesn't respect that. He respects government of Trump, by Trump, for Trump, or the billionaire class that he seems to represent. He seems to believe that he can take over cities at will. And by the way, I think that this behavior in Washington, D.C., this takeover, is good reason to start to lay the foundation again for statehood. I really think that this is proof that D.C. should have the same privileges and immunities that the governors of states have when there's an effort to bring in the National Guard. You have to get their consent unless there's this legitimate emergency. And obviously, he's very good at concocting emergencies. So I think that I will be among those who will be calling for statehood in an even louder voice. I've always thought that it should be there, but I've called for it in a louder voice. And I'm going to suggest to people that we start a movement to push for statehood for DC. This is the proof that we need to support the movement that is needed.
Yeah, I've always been in favor of DC statehood. The taxation without representation there is just insane. And it's kind of like one of those problems like the Senate with the completely wild disproportionate representation and the Electoral College. It's one of those kind of just dark stains on our democracy for years that needs to be rectified. And what better incentive to put more Democrats in office who would be willing to do this? But again, the way where I land on this is we have to, like you have been, not wait for the midterms. We have to be taking action now. We are getting more and more acknowledgments that we are living in an authoritarian takeover. I mean, that is where we are now. It's not going to happen. It's happening now. We can't continue to move the goalposts and say, oh, when he does this, then we will do that in response. We have one constitutional means. I mean, there's several for different circumstances, but one real mechanism to remove a tyrant, to remove someone who abuses their power, who engages in high crimes and misdemeanors like this man does on a daily basis. One in our Constitution that gives your body the authority to remove him, and it's the impeachment clause. That is what we have. That is what we have. We cannot pretend like we have this mechanism that is enshrined, that is the foundation of our freedom and our representative democracy, and not use it. I don't have any patience for that. And that's why I opened with what I loved Governor Newsom say yesterday was decisions, not conditions. We don't sit idle while we're living amongst some conditions that we don't like. We make decisions to change those conditions. And our decisions can change everything. You know, what I think about with these Epstein files is one very clear example of how the narrative can be changed to what it should be, how you can get even people who you wouldn't dream of crossing the aisle to come and vote to have this man removed. If we are on board that we finally have the clear-eyed consensus, and they are forced to acknowledge that they are backing someone who is a criminal, who is a predator, who is covering for a sex trafficker of children, we can move votes even on the Republican side. I don't know if you heard this, Representative Green, but Representative Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie, who has been a thorn in Trump's side on the Republican side, are having a press conference with survivors of Epstein just the day after our event on 9/2. On September 3rd, they are going to have a conference with Epstein survivors. So I hope, Representative Green, that more colleagues join you more than anything. You shouldn't be the only one doing this, but I also hope to see you file more articles and force more votes. I will tell you that.
Well, I assure you there are more articles on the way.
Okay.
And I appreciate your level of enthusiastic support, and would hope, as you've said, that my colleagues would join me. But I will tell you, this is one of those issues where I've concluded that it's better to stand alone than not stand at all, for me.
Yes.
Because it's a question of conscience. And when you see the Constitution being violated, and you see that the courts cannot stop him, and his party won't stop him, then you're right. There's but one thing left, and that one thing is impeachment, without question. That's what is given every member of Congress the ability to bring the articles of impeachment to a vote. I will do as much as I can, and that means I will file and bring articles to a vote. But I want to mention one other thing as it relates to this authoritarianism. You might recall some time ago, Jess, that we indicated that we shouldn't have to wait until there are tanks on American streets before we conclude that we would be into authoritarianism. So now here we are, Washington, D.C., the nation's capital, and you see these military type vehicles out there on the streets of the nation's capital. When will we say enough is enough? This should be the thing that would trigger a good many people who have large audiences, who have great microphones. You would think that they would say something about this. And I've paid attention to the news, and I've heard one other station sort of mentioning it in passing. But this is something that should be focused on. We said this, and when we said it, we were criticized because people were saying, this will never happen. You're not going to have any kind of military tanks or equipment on American streets, but it's there. So at some point, we have to acknowledge it, and we have to deal with it. We have to make decisions, as you've indicated.
Yeah, we really do have to. This is from the Closer to the Edge Substack, and they're really shining a light on the case of Ayman Solomon. He's a faith leader. He's worked as a hospital chaplain for many, many years. He is a political asylum. He sought political asylum in the United States in 2018. He was granted that. He fled after being prosecuted in Egypt for covering the Arab Spring as a journalist. He has now been detained by ICE. He is in prison in solitary confinement in Butler County Jail in Ohio. And they are claiming that he has ties to the Muslim Brotherhood, which is not even a designated terrorist organization, but everybody that knows this man is just coming to his defense as to what an incredible community asset he has been. And he's got a hearing coming up on August 28th in Ohio to determine his fate. There, and as much light as we can shine on this as possible is so appreciated. I think of the case of, Mahmoud Khalil or any number of the other people who enough public outrage has been directed that we have been able to free these people from this unjust imprisonment. But you just see the demonization of people who are coming to this country, escaping prosecution in other countries, or calling out injustice, like Mahmoud Khalil, calling out the injustice of what's going on in Gaza, the torture of justice seekers, of faith leaders, of community people who contribute so much to their community. It's really justice and just empathy and humanity completely turned on its head.
The president is doing what a typical authoritarian does. While I'm not familiar with the intricacies of this case, I know his behavior. With Abrego Garcia, for example, he made him into the world's worst person. And that way, he has a minority person who's a bad guy, so now we can treat him any way that we like. But by taking his constitutional rights from him, he lays the groundwork for taking my constitutional rights away from me and your constitutional rights away from you, denying us those rights. Yeah. So he's very good at selecting, and the people who work with him, they select minority people so that they can show the majority that they are really protecting them, at some point, that same level of ugliness will turn on you. And then it will be your turn to have to suffer the consequences of injustice. We try to protect those who are the least among us so that we can protect all of us. The president's not going to pick on somebody who has stature in doing this. He's going to always find someone that can be made into the villain. And that person is going to be associated with minorities, which brings us to Texas. When he decided that he would get 5 seats in Texas, 4 of those seats were seats that either elected minority persons, as the case with the 18th congressional district, or had minority people in place. And he used a trigger word, his agent did in the Justice Department, used the trigger word racial gerrymandering, said that the seats were racially gerrymandered so that people of color could get elected. And the Attorney General for the state of Texas said that's just not true. We don't draw lines like that. But they have stood by that proposition because they know that when they say that, there's a majority in society who will say, well, it's okay for them to take those seats. Those people shouldn't have gotten them anyway. These minority folk have been given something that they shouldn't have. That's what he's doing. He's using this power, the awesome power of the presidency, against minorities so that he can gain favor with the majority, so that he can maintain his position of power and authority. The House of Representatives is swinging toward Democrats. It is. And he sees this. So he's running scared. And in running scared, he's trying to amass as many seats as he can by hook or crook, mostly by hook and crook, so that he can maintain his position of authority. But he's using racism to do it. What he's doing is racist. It is contrary to the Voting Rights Act, or Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, and we have to stand against it. If we don't stand against it, we are complicit. Anyone who refuses to stand up to this kind of racism is, in a sense, perpetuating it, because we don't stop it, and we don't stop it, it goes on. So we have to stand against it. I hope that people can see how he is making the minority population in this society the villains. Every person who looks like a Latino now is suspect. If you're standing out at some Home Depot where people are out trying to get a job, and you happen to be a person who's standing there and you're an American citizen, but if you're Latino, there's some belief now that you can be questioned and you can be asked to show your papers. This is not a show your paper society. We have rules that allow people to walk freely without being subjugated to police interrogation. This is what we do in authoritarian countries. Not we, but what's done in authoritarian countries. And if we don't stop it now, it will get to a point where we may not be able to stop this. What are you going to do when we cannot stop this and it's time for him to leave office? When he has control of the generals, when he has control of the military, when people are sycophants to the extent that they report to him and not to the Constitution. What will we do then? Only we, the people, will be able to stop this. And I hope that we, the people, will be prepared to do what we, the people, must do to protest and make it known that we will not tolerate authoritarianism in this country, where we have all of these years fought to protect the republic and the democracy that has made us the country that allows many of us to have the success stories that we enjoy.
Amen to that. Amen to that, Reverend. I'm so glad you brought it back to the Texas conversation and about rigging elections. Now, I'm sure you've heard that term repeatedly over the past several weeks. People are acknowledging that Donald Trump is trying to rig the 2026 midterm election. They're calling it in California the Election Rigging Response Act. We all know that Donald Trump tried and failed to rig the election after he lost for himself in 2020. But there's an election, that we seem to have had a memory lapse on, and that is the 2024 election. And I told you when we were talking on the phone planning for this interview that I was at DEF CON last weekend in Las Vegas. And I got to speak to a lot of election security experts that I've had on the show. These are not tinfoil hat conspiracy theorists. They are not partisans. They're people who are genuinely concerned with the security and safety of our elections. I know you said to me on the phone, we need paper ballots, and it's so critical. We need hand-marked paper ballots, but in so much of this country, we still don't have them. 70% of this country has machines that are run by two companies that have not adequately mitigated significant breaches of their security that happened by Donald Trump's cabal following the 2020 election. His conspirators, Sidney Powell and others, stole the software to Dominion voting machines, and these machines were never secured properly after this. Kind of both looking backward and looking forward to 2026, can we have an acknowledgement? And I don't want you to, I'm not going to put the whole burden of the entire Democratic Party on your shoulders, Rep. Green, but there's been such a desperation for there to be some acknowledgement from Democratic lawmakers that we have to look at the security of voting machines and acknowledge that although America should be the gold standard for elections, there are so many cracks in the system that we still have to seal to make sure that Donald Trump doesn't just try to rig it by gerrymandering, but he could try to rig it by hacking. He very well could have tried to rig it by hacking in 2024. We have to have clear eyes and be able to handle this conversation like adults if we're going to secure the election in that way.
I believe that many people find themselves in an awkward position because when President Trump was alleging that there was hacking and that was defended, and you had people who were there who were of his ilk, who were Republicans, who were saying nothing happened with our machines, it caused people to defend the current system, which is void of a paper trail. Let's assume that things are working fine. You still, if you have that paper trail, you've got the best backup you can have. You can have the electronic as far as I'm concerned, but if there's a dispute, I want us to be able to say, here are the ballots. Let's just check to see what these paper ballots say about this. And that has worked for us before. I remember a time when we didn't have these electronic ballots, when you would literally have something that you would click and it would produce a piece of paper, and that piece of paper was taken by you would examine it, and you would put it over in the ballot box. And that was available for us to check the ballots. And so there were times when we had some ballots that may have been obscured in some way such that you couldn't really count them. Okay, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't still have that backup. I'm a strong believer in having a paper trail backup for any electronic system, because yes, they can be hacked. I don't know the technology well enough to explain to you how it happens, but I know that if you can hack into, the government, to the military, you can hack into the most sacred things that we have. These governments do that to each other.
Exactly.
Then I can't sit and say to people, don't worry, we have a foolproof system. No, you need the backup of paper.
We absolutely do. And hand-marked paper ballots. I literally sat there and we put up the video here on Lights On of while a software engineer, a hobbyist really, showed to me how he was able to hack into a Dominion voting machine that he purchased off the internet with a technician card that they purchased off the internet, the same machines that were in use in 2020 and 2024. He demonstrated it literally in front of my eyes in about 15 minutes. How simple it was to hack these machines, to switch names. So if somebody thought they were voting for Kamala Harris, it would actually print out a paper ballot that showed them they were voting for Kamala Harris, but it was sending that vote to Donald Trump. That he showed me how simple that hack could be. And like you said, if they can hack countries and we have the technological capability to do incredible hacks, why wouldn't they try to compromise these voting machines? We absolutely have to keep our eyes on this. And I'm glad that you confirmed that is a need. I really appreciate that, because to be honest with you, Congressman Green, it's voices like yours that are needed on this issue, because there has been such silence. There has been such a fear because of the spectacle that Trump and his allies created in 2020. Democrats have been afraid to touch this conversation with a 10-foot pole, and that silence is a very dangerous space to be. So I really appreciate you commenting on it.
Well, I appreciate you bringing it up, but I will be very candid with you. This is a position that I've had for literally more than a decade, probably decades now. We here in Texas acquired this technology, and I was very disappointed that we didn't have the paper backup system initially. We have some semblance of that now, but the point that you made about being able to mark your own ballot and to place your ballot into a repository so that it can be properly counted, that's a pretty significant point. And so what if it takes a little bit of time? This is an election. It's
only the free world at stake, right?
Yes, it may take a little bit more time, but voting is something that we really don't value as we should, I think, in this country. And I'd like to give you just an explanation for what's going on here. I believe it was Thomas Paine, maybe, that said, what we obtain too cheap, we esteem too lightly. And I may be quoting the wrong person, but let me just explain what that means. The people who have to fight for whatever it is, these rights that we have, they really appreciate them because they had to fight. Now, the greater the distance from the people who had to fight, the greater the likelihood that people don't appreciate the fight itself and what they have as a result of the fight. Every one of those people on the Edmund Pettus Bridge appreciated the Voting Rights Act without question. But there's many of us today who don't understand and appreciate that fight. And as a result, we sort of take for granted these rights that we have, and the fact that we are voting and we can walk in and not be harassed. Some people still are, by the way, but we kind of take these things for granted. So what we have to do is what you're doing now. You have to keep talking about it. You have to keep saying it so that somebody will wake up and say, you know what? This is something that I should pay attention to. And when you go to vote the next time, perhaps you'll look now to see if you have a legitimate paper trail to back up this electronic system. I think this is the way we get society to realize that there are still issues that have to be dealt with. Otherwise, we just take for granted that these things are well protected and we don't have to become a part of the sentinel and that this is our watch and we have to look over what has been acquired for us by others to the same extent that we look over it if we were the persons who actually acquired the rights for others ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. What's one thing we don't even take for granted on this show, Rep. Green, is that Donald Trump won 2024 fairly, because there were too many red flags. There were election security experts begging for recounts and audits within the time frame. There were Russian hacks, Russian bomb threats on Democratic precincts, almost 200 Democratic precincts on election day, to bring this all back to Russia. What the hell was going on with that? What the hell? You know, I mean, too many unanswered questions, and we have to have the courage to dig in. So thank you so much. As always, thank you for being a David. I wanted to make one comment that I love so much about the story of David and Goliath, because you always bring it up. One thing I love about that story, and just kind of in the theme of those threats that you face and everything, that I realized at some point reading that story as a child, and I love so much, is when David was offered armor, the typical armor, he said, no, thank you. I haven't tested that. I haven't tested that armor. His armor was spiritual. His armor was being on the side of good and on the side of right. And that's all that he wanted, and it's all that he needed. And it's what protected him, and it's what had got him victory. So we have that armor. I know that armor is with you, Representative Green, and thank you for being such a beautiful example to all of us as to how to stand out in the face of these threats, knowing what your true armor is.
Well, you're very kind, and I appreciate your kindness. And I'd like to mention one other David, and that's our friend John Boniface,
Yes.
who is a full-time constitutional scholar. He doesn't wait until he believes he can win the argument to make the constitutional argument. He makes it when there's a breach of the Constitution. So, John, just want to give you a big shout out and thank you for being the David that you are.
Yeah, we love John so much. John, from President of Free Speech for People, who, by the way, who are leading the DEF CON voting village, was their election security expert, Susan Greenhalgh. But incredible work they do there, and it's been such a pleasure to work with him. So we're going to see you in Washington D.C. on September 2nd. I hope we see all of you too in the audience. Please make your plans to join us on September 2nd. This is going to be really I think a narrative shifting day in our nation's history. I hope that you can join us then. I know a lot of protests are happening this weekend as well. And if you can, definitely get out and join one of those protests. As always, my friends, thank you for joining us here on Lights On. Thank you to the Congressman. If you want to support me and my work, you can do it at thejessicadenson.com/donate. I need your support. I really do. I need your support to continue this activism. I need your support to continue my legal battle against the Trump campaign that endures to this day. So you can do that at thejessicadenson.com/donate. You can buy merch at thejessicadenson.com. Thank you to everybody who's a member here on the Lights On with Jessica Denson a YouTube channel, and for subscribing to the Jessica Denson YouTube channel. It means the world to me. This family of true fighters, peaceful warriors for our democracy that we've built together. Thank you so much for being in this fight with me. As always, have a wonderful weekend and let your light shine.